The unbreakable pact. The battlefield was silent except for the crackling of distant fires and the occasional groan of the dying. Smoke filled the air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood. The war between humans and the Draxir had raged for years, but this was the worst battle yet. Entire squads had been wiped out. Sergeant Daniel Carter pressed his back against a broken steel wall, gripping his rifle with bloody fingers. His squad was gone. He was the last survivor. His radio crackled with static, no voices, no reinforcements. He was completely alone. Footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate. Daniel turned his head and saw him, a towering Draxir warrior, standing at least 8 feet tall, his dark red skin covered in deep scars. His golden eyes locked onto Daniel, filled with something. Not anger. Curiosity. Daniel had heard the stories. The Draxir were brutal, merciless warriors, known for never leaving survivors. But something was different about this one. The alien warrior was watching him, studying him, as if deciding something. Daniel raised his rifle, but the Draxir shook his head slowly. "You are not like the others," the alien said in a deep, rumbling voice. Daniel's heart pounded. This was the first time he had ever heard a Draxir speak human language. "Neither are you," Daniel said, keeping his weapon raised. The alien warrior stepped closer, his massive muscles shifting under thick armor. His hands were empty, no weapon in sight. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to run, but he had nowhere to go. His leg was injured, and he was already exhausted. "My name is Varak," the Draxir said. "You fight with honor. You do not run." Daniel swallowed hard. This had to be some kind of trick. "You watched me fight." Varak nodded. Many humans fall when they are alone. They beg. They scream. He tilted his head. "But you still stand." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I stand because I have no other choice." Varak grinned, showing sharp, beast-like teeth. "Good." Then, to Daniel's complete shock, Varak extended his hand, a massive, clawed palm open in front of him. "This is a warrior's bond," Varak said. "It is unbreakable. No human has ever taken it." Daniel stared at the hand. His instincts told him not to trust the alien, but deep inside, something told him this was real. "What happens if I take it?" Daniel asked. Varak's golden eyes gleamed. "Then I fight for you, and you fight for me. We are brothers in war." Daniel hesitated. A bond with a Draxir. That was insane. His people and Varak's people had been killing each other for years. But he had seen how the Draxir fought together. They were never alone. They were stronger together. And Daniel, he was alone, broken, forgotten. What if this wasn't a trick? What if this was his only way to survive? His breathing slowed. His grip on the rifle loosened. Slowly, carefully, he reached forward. His hand met Varak's palm. A deep rumble filled the air, almost like thunder. Varak tightened his grip, his strength crushing, but not enough to break bones. Instead, it was a test. Daniel didn't flinch. He squeezed back. Varak grinned. "It is done." The Draxir warrior's bond had been formed. But as Daniel looked into Varak's fierce eyes, he realized something. This was only the beginning. The ritual of blood and fire. Daniel Carter limped behind Varak, his injured leg barely holding up as they moved through the ruins of the battlefield. The sky above was dark, filled with smoke and the distant flashes of energy weapons. The ground beneath them was littered with wreckage, bodies, and broken weapons. Every part of Daniel's instincts screamed that this was a bad idea. He had just shaken hands with the enemy, not just any enemy, but a Draxir, a species known for their brutality in war. Yet here he was, following one into unknown territory. "Where are we going?" Daniel asked, his voice hoarse. Varak didn't look back. "To my war camp. You are bonded to me now. You must be tested." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Tested?" The last few hours had already tested him more than he ever thought possible. He had lost his squad, barely survived an ambush, and now he was about to walk into an enemy base, alone. Was he insane? But a part of him, deep down, knew this was the only way forward. They walked for nearly an hour through rocky canyons and desolate wastelands before Daniel spotted movement ahead. Shadows loomed in the distance, tall figures with glowing golden eyes watching from the cliffs above. Daniel's heart pounded. More Draxur. As they entered the camp, Daniel felt every pair of eyes on him. The Draxur were massive creatures, each standing between 7 to 9 feet tall, their skin covered in scars from past battles. Their armor was crude but effective, made from the bones of creatures Daniel didn't recognize. They stared at him with pure hatred. A low growl rippled through the crowd as warriors stepped forward, their expressions a mix of confusion and fury. Varak, a Draxur warlord, rumbled, stepping closer. He was even bigger than Varak, his skin dark green with a deep scar running across his chest. What is this thing doing here? Varak stood firm. He is my bondmate. Silence. Then the camp exploded with rage. Warriors hissed and shouted, some raising their weapons. Others laughed in disbelief. A human? One spat. A weakling. This is an insult. Another growled. Daniel clenched his fists. He could feel the anger in the air, the unspoken promise of violence. He wasn't just an outsider. He was an enemy. Varak's voice thundered over the chaos. Enough. The warriors fell silent, though their glares remained. This human fought with honor. He stood against death and did not yield. I extended the warrior's bond, and he accepted. The green-skinned warlord bared his teeth. That bond is meant for warriors. He is not one of us. Varak took a step forward, his golden eyes glowing. Then let him prove it. The warriors stilled. Daniel frowned. Prove it how? Varak turned to him, his face unreadable. Through the rite of fire and blood. Daniel exhaled slowly. Whatever this rite was, it didn't sound good. The warlord grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. Yes, if the human wants to claim the bond, he must survive. Daniel looked around. The warriors were already forming a circle, their bodies tense with excitement. His gut twisted. This was no simple trial. This was a fight. The trial begins. Daniel stood in the middle of the circle, sweat dripping down his back. Around him, dozens of Draxur warriors watched eagerly. Some muttered bets, others sharpened their weapons. Varak stood outside the ring, arms crossed. You must endure 3 trials, he said. Survive them, and you will be one of us. Fail, and you will die. Daniel wiped his bloody hand on his torn uniform. Great. No pressure. The first trial was called the Gauntlet. The Draxur warriors lined up on both sides of the ring, massive wooden clubs and jagged shields in their hands. Run, Varak said. If you make it through the gauntlet alive, you pass. Daniel's breath hitched. They wanted him to run through that. Before he could ask any more questions, the first warrior swung a club straight at his head. Daniel ducked, barely missing the blow. Instinct took over. He dashed forward, weaving between the warriors, his muscles screaming in protest. A fist caught his ribs. Another slammed into his back. He fell, rolling across the dirt, but he forced himself up. Pain exploded through his shoulder as a wooden shield rammed into him. He kept moving. He gritted his teeth and sprinted. The warriors were brutal, their hits designed to break bones. But Daniel had trained for pain. By the time he reached the end, his vision was blurry, and blood dripped from his nose. His uniform was torn, his skin covered in bruises. But he was still standing. The warriors stared in shock. Varak nodded. Good. The beast trial. A massive iron gate was opened, and a monstrous creature stomped into the ring. It had 4 arms, razor-sharp tusks, and a tail lined with spikes. Daniel swallowed. You've got to be kidding me. Varek's voice was steady. Kill it, or it kills you. The beast charged. Daniel rolled aside, barely dodging the tusks. He reached for his knife, the only weapon they allowed him. The creature roared and swung its massive tail. Daniel leaped over it and stabbed into its thick hide. The beast thrashed, throwing him to the ground. Daniel gasped as his back slammed into the dirt. The creature lunged. Daniel grabbed a sharp bone from the ground and rammed it into the beast's eye. The creature let out a deafening shriek, stumbling backward. Daniel didn't stop. He tore his knife free and slashed its throat. The beast collapsed. Silence. Then, the Dracseer roared. The warlord, who had doubted Daniel, narrowed his eyes. Perhaps the human is stronger than he looks. Varrak stepped forward and placed a heavy hand on Daniel's shoulder. You have survived the first 2 trials. Only one remains. Daniel, covered in blood and sweat, exhaled shakily. What's the last one? Varrak's golden eyes gleamed. You must fight me. Daniel's stomach dropped. He had just fought a monster. Now he had to fight an 8-foot alien giant, and he could not afford to lose. When a human and alien fight is won. Daniel Carter stood in the middle of the arena, his body bruised, his breath heavy. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with dirt and blood. He had survived the gauntlet. He had killed the beast. But now, he had to fight Varrak. The Dracseer warrior, 8 feet of pure muscle and battle scars, stepped into the ring. His golden eyes glowed in the dim torchlight, his presence like that of an ancient warlord from a forgotten time. The crowd of warriors around them stomped their feet, chanting in their guttural language. They wanted blood. Last trial, Varrak said, cracking his neck. No weapons, no tricks, only strength. Daniel exhaled. Great. Before he could prepare, Varrak charged. A freight train of muscle and fury slammed into him. Daniel barely had time to dodge, rolling to the side, his ribs aching from earlier wounds. Varrak was fast, too fast for something that big. A massive fist swung toward him. Daniel ducked at the last second, the punch whistling past his ear. He countered, aiming a strike at Varrak's side, but it was like hitting a wall. Varrak grabbed him by the arm and threw him across the ring. Daniel hit the ground hard, dust rising around him. His lungs burned, but he forced himself up. Laughter rippled through the crowd. To them, this was a game. Varrak rolled his shoulders. You are slow, human. Daniel wiped blood from his mouth. Yeah, well, you're predictable. Varrak's grin widened. Then prove it. A fight of speed is strength. Daniel had fought plenty of battles, but this was different. He wasn't up against an enemy using weapons. He was fighting a warrior bred for hand-to-hand combat. Varrak swung again. Daniel dropped low, sweeping his leg at Varrak's ankle. The Dracseer stumbled but didn't fall. He was too strong. So Daniel changed his tactics. Instead of fighting strength with strength, he used speed. He darted around Varrak, dodging his attacks, using quick jabs and strikes to wear him down. Varrak grunted as Daniel's fist connected with his jaw. A murmur went through the crowd. The human had landed a hit. Daniel didn't stop. He slammed his elbow into Varrak's ribs, then spun and delivered a kick to his knee. Varrak staggered. The crowd went silent. Daniel panted. His whole body ached, but he had found the weak spots. You fight differently, Varrak muttered. Daniel smirked. Humans don't fight fair. The final blow. But Varrak wasn't done. With one final charge, he tackled Daniel, slamming him into the dirt. A mountain of weight pinned him down. Daniel's arms burned as he struggled. He was strong, but Varrak was stronger. This was it. He had pushed his limits. But then, his training kicked in. Instead of fighting the strength, he redirected it. He twisted his body, using Varrak's momentum against him, and flipped him over. The crowd gasped. Daniel rolled free, getting to his feet before Varak. For the first time, the giant stayed down for a moment. Then, slowly, Varak laughed. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't cruel. It was respect. He pushed himself up, grinning with sharp teeth. "You win," Varak said, nodding. "I yield." Silence. Then a roar erupted from the warriors. The human had passed the trials. Daniel barely believed it himself. Varak extended his massive hand. Daniel stared at it for a second. Then, with all the strength left in his body, he gripped it. The bond was complete. Daniel Carter was no longer just a human. He was now a warrior of the Draxur. Acceptance and the coming war. That night, the warriors gathered around a massive fire. Meat roasted on spits, and drums pounded in a rhythm that made the air vibrate. Daniel sat next to Varak, nursing his wounds. Around him, Draxur warriors nodded in approval, their earlier hatred gone. "You have done something impossible," Varak said. "No human has ever fought like you, never survived like you." Daniel chuckled, wincing at the pain. "Yeah, well, humans are full of surprises." Varak nodded. "We will need your surprises. The war is not over." Daniel's expression darkened. He had almost forgotten. The enemy was still up there. And now he had a new family to protect. The night air was thick with tension. This was only the beginning. Betrayal in the shadows. The night was restless. The great bonfires of the Draxur war camp burned high, casting flickering shadows against the towering canyon walls. Warriors feasted, roared with laughter, and recounted their most glorious battles. Daniel Carter sat beside Varak, his body aching from the brutal trials. Though his ribs throbbed and his bruises burned, he had done the impossible. He had earned his place among the warriors. But something felt wrong. The atmosphere around him was different now. Yes, many warriors had accepted him, their once hostile glares replaced with cautious respect. But there were still those who watched him with disdain, their eyes glinting with something dangerous. Daniel wasn't stupid. He had been in enough battlefields to know the feeling of a blade waiting to strike. And tonight, someone in this camp wanted him dead. The enemy within. The war camp was vast, built into the ruins of an ancient fortress, its crumbling stone walls reinforced with metal plating and salvaged ship parts. The Draxur, despite their brute strength, had survived by adapting. They were not mindless warriors. Daniel followed Varak through the camp, his mind still spinning from everything that had happened. "You fight well," Varak said as they walked past a row of training pits where younger warriors clashed in practice duels. "Better than I expected." Daniel smirked. "And here I thought you were betting against me." Varak grinned, but there was something guarded in his expression. He wasn't telling Daniel everything. "I fought for you," Varak said, "but not all agree with my choice." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I noticed." Varak led him to a tent made of thick black hide, reinforced with metal beams. Inside, a large fire pit burned low, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Daniel sat on a stone bench, exhaling sharply. "All right, tell me the bad news." Varak folded his arms. "Many see you as a threat. They do not understand the bond we made. To them, you are still an outsider." Daniel scoffed. "So what? I passed the trials. I survived. What more do they want?" Varak's golden eyes darkened. "They want you dead." Silence. Daniel felt the weight of those words sink in. He had fought through hell to earn his place here, but now he realized that the real battle hadn't even started. "There are those who would rather see you fall before your influence spreads," Varak continued. "They fear you will change things." Daniel frowned. "Change what?" Varak didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned toward the fire, watching the embers flicker. "The Draxur have followed the same path for centuries. Strength rules. The weak fall. There is no room for bonds beyond our own kind." Daniel leaned forward. "Then why did you bond with me?" Varak met his gaze. Because the future will not be won by strength alone. It will be won by something more. Daniel studied the alien warrior. He had risked everything by choosing to bond with a human. But now, that choice had made him a target too. The assassin's strike. Daniel barely got 3 hours of sleep before it happened. A sudden shift in the air woke him. A feeling of movement, something unnatural. Years of combat experience sent alarm bells ringing in his head. Someone was inside the tent. Daniel didn't move. He kept his breathing steady, his eyes half closed. A shadow crept along the edge of the tent, silent, patient. The assassin's steps were careful, controlled. Not a warrior's walk. This was a hunter. Daniel waited. Closer, closer. Now. In an instant, Daniel rolled off his bedroll and grabbed his attacker's wrist, stopping the knife inches from his throat. The assassin snarled, a Draxer with pale blue skin and black war paint. Another figure lunged from the side. Daniel barely managed to twist away before a second blade slashed toward his ribs. 2 attackers. He didn't have a weapon, but he didn't need one. He had the element of surprise. Using the assassin's own weight against him, Daniel twisted the first attacker's arm, snapping it with a sickening crack. The warrior howled in pain, dropping his blade. The second assassin came in fast, trying to finish the job. Daniel ducked low and drove his fist into the warrior's throat, cutting off his breath. The assassin stumbled back, gasping, but before Daniel could strike again, a third shadow moved. This one was different. Bigger, stronger. Daniel had no time to react. A heavy blow slammed into his chest, sending him flying across the tent. He hit the ground hard, his vision flashing white with pain. The last assassin stood over him, raising a cruel, curved blade. And then, a deafening roar. The tent exploded as Varak stormed in, moving faster than Daniel had ever seen. The giant warrior grabbed the assassin by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "No," Varak growled. "Not this night." With a sickening crunch, Varak snapped the assassin's neck and dropped the body to the floor. The last wounded assassin tried to crawl away. Varak stepped on his back, pinning him down. Daniel coughed, pushing himself up. Nice timing. Varak ignored him. His golden eyes burned with rage. "You dishonor the Draxer," he said to the wounded assassin. "You strike a bondmate in the dark, like a coward." The assassin hissed. "You betray our kind." Varak tightened his grip around the warrior's throat. "No, I fight for its future." With one final motion, he ended the assassin's life. Daniel exhaled slowly. He was alive, but just barely. Varak turned to him. "We must leave." Daniel frowned. "What? Why?" The giant warrior's expression was grim. "Because this is only the beginning," Varak said. "Whoever sent them will try again. And next time, it will not be 3 assassins. It will be an army." Daniel cursed under his breath. He had survived war. He had survived the trials. But now he was part of a much deadlier game. And he had no idea how deep this betrayal ran. The unthinkable alliance. The war camp was no longer safe. Daniel Carter and Varak moved through the dark canyon passages, leaving behind the fires of the Draxer stronghold. The assassins' corpses lay cold in the tent, their failed attack proving only one thing. Daniel's presence had tipped the balance of power. Now he wasn't just a bonded warrior. He was a threat. Every step through the rocky terrain sent a painful jolt through his bruised ribs. His breathing was steady, but the weight of what had just happened sat heavy on his chest. "This is bigger than just a few assassins," Daniel muttered. Varak walked beside him, his golden eyes narrowed in thought. Yes, this was not an act of honorless warriors. It was planned. Daniel scoffed. "And I'm guessing they weren't acting alone." Varak's silence confirmed it. Daniel wiped the dried blood from his temple and exhaled. "Then who's behind this?" "The Draxer Warlord Council." Varak's expression hardened. There are those who believe our ways should never change. That bonding with a human is an insult to our ancestors. They see you as a disruption. Daniel laughed bitterly. Yeah, I got that part when they sent people to murder me in my sleep. Varak stopped, turning toward him. It is worse than you think. Daniel met his gaze. How bad? Varak's next words sent a chill down his spine. They will rally the warriors against you. If they succeed, they will declare war on the humans. The road to war. Daniel felt his stomach sink. A full-scale Draxur invasion of human colonies. That wasn't just bad. It was galactic extinction-level bad. The Draxur were notorious for their ruthless battle tactics, their warriors nearly impossible to kill in close combat. They'll slaughter civilians, Daniel said, his fists clenching. Varak nodded. And in return, the humans will retaliate. Your kind does not surrender either. It will be endless war. Daniel ran a hand through his short, dust-covered hair. So they'd rather risk a war that'll wipe out millions just to stop one human from being part of their ranks. To them, you are not just one human. You are a symbol of change. And they fear that more than war. Daniel took a deep breath. He had come to this place just trying to survive. Now he was standing at the edge of a war between species. And if the warlords had their way, this wouldn't just be about him. It would be the destruction of everything. A desperate plan. The night stretched long as they moved through the canyon. At dawn, they stopped near a ridge overlooking the valley below. A massive Draxur war fleet rested there, rows of metal warships, heavily armed. Daniel's gut twisted. The fleet was preparing for battle. Damn it, he muttered. Varak watched quietly. The warlords are moving fast. Daniel paced, thinking fast. There has to be a way to stop this. Varak crossed his arms. There is, but it will not be easy. Daniel gestured toward the fleet. You got a plan. Varak's golden eyes glinted with something dangerous. We will take control of the fleet. Silence. Daniel blinked. You want us to hijack an entire Draxur war fleet? Just the two of us. Varak grinned. We will not be alone. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Oh, who else is crazy enough to help us? Varak's smile widened. The ones who believe in change. The warriors who dare. Varak led Daniel through a hidden passageway along the canyon walls. They reached a small underground chamber, lit by torches. Inside, a group of Draxur warriors waited. Daniel immediately noticed something different about them. They weren't like the warlords. They had leaner armor, sharper weapons, and their eyes burned with something more than blind loyalty. They had the look of rebels. One of them, a female Draxur with deep violet skin, stepped forward. So, this is the human, she said, studying Daniel with a piercing gaze. Daniel frowned. You sound disappointed. She smirked. I expected something bigger. Daniel sighed. Yeah, well, I get that a lot. Varak interrupted. We do not have time for introductions. We need to act before the warlords move. Another warrior, a massive Draxur with burned scars across his chest, spoke. The warlords control the fleet. How do you expect to take it? Daniel cracked his knuckles. I have an idea. The infiltration. The plan was insane, but it was the only chance they had. Under the cover of night, Daniel and the rebel warriors slipped through the valley, moving like shadows toward the war fleet. The warlords had fortified their defenses, but they weren't expecting an attack from their own kind. Varak moved ahead, taking out sentries silently. Daniel followed close behind, his instincts razor-sharp. The closer they got to the command center, the heavier the security became. Then, all hell broke loose. An alarm blared. Move, Varak roared. The rebel warriors rushed forward, weapons drawn. Daniel grabbed a fallen Draxur energy rifle, aiming at the guards. He wasn't a warrior in size, but he had one advantage: tactical precision. He fired, taking down a warlord guard before he could raise the alarm again. The battle erupted. The warlord's forces clashed against the rebels in brutal close combat. Daniel used his speed to his advantage, dodging heavy blows, taking down enemies with well-placed shots. Varak, however, was unstoppable. He tore through the enemy ranks, his roars shaking the battlefield. Within minutes, they reached the command center. The doors were sealed. Daniel turned to Varak. "We get in there. We control the fleet. You got a way in." Varak nodded toward the control panel nearby. "Only a warlord can override it," he said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Then I hope you got a good warlord impression." Varak didn't answer. He simply grabbed a wounded warlord guard, slammed his hand against the scanner, and waited. The doors hissed open. Daniel grinned. "That works too." They rushed inside, sealing the entrance behind them. In front of them, a massive control panel hummed with power. Screens showed the entire fleet, ready for deployment. Varak placed a heavy hand on the console. Daniel watched as his expression turned serious. "Once we do this, there is no turning back." Daniel exhaled. "Good." Varak activated the controls. A message flashed across the fleet's systems. The warlords no longer commanded this army. Daniel and Varak did. And now, the fate of two species rested in their hands. The final battle. The war fleet belonged to them now. Daniel Carter stood in the command center, staring at the screens displaying the massive Draxir warships. The fleet was armed and ready for war, originally meant to strike against humanity. But now it was his to command. Varak stood beside him, his golden eyes fixed on the holographic display. "The warlords will not sit idle. They will come for us." Daniel nodded. "Let them. We're ready." A low alarm suddenly blared across the control room. The fleet's sensors had detected movement. Daniel turned to the console. "What the hell is that?" A warrior at the station growled in alarm. "A warlord fleet is approaching, at least 20 battleships." The traitorous warlords had moved faster than expected. Daniel felt his gut twist. This wasn't just a skirmish. This was a full-scale battle for control. And if they lost, humanity would burn. The warlords counterattack. The enemy fleet emerged from the darkness of space, their engines burning red. Daniel could see their formations shifting, classic Draxir battle lines, built for overwhelming brute force. The warlords were expecting to take them down quickly. But Daniel had one advantage. They didn't know that a human was calling the shots now. He turned to Varak. "We can't fight them head-on. They outnumber us." Varak nodded. "Then we use your human tactics." Daniel smirked. "Exactly." He leaned over the control panel and activated the fleet's stealth disruptors. "Let's make them think they've already won." The Draxir rebels vanished from enemy scanners. The warlord ships charged forward, unaware that they were walking into a trap. The ambush. The warlord's fleet pushed through the asteroid belt, looking for their prey. Then, boom! The first warship exploded in a ball of fire. The shockwave tore through space as debris scattered. The warlords had flown directly into Daniel's minefield. Then the real battle began. The Draxir rebel fleet uncloaked, opening fire with devastating precision. Laser cannons shredded enemy armor, while torpedoes tore through command decks. Daniel stood at the control station, issuing orders with rapid precision. "Varak, tell our fighters to hit their engines first. We don't need to kill them. We just need them dead in the water." Varak relayed the orders, his voice booming across the comms. The battle was chaos, ships burning, explosions lighting up the void, warriors clashing in boarding fights. But the tide was turning. The warlords were losing, the betrayer among them. Just as victory seemed certain, a warning flashed on the screen. Daniel's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. A transmission interrupted the comms, but deep, guttural voice filled the command deck. "You have fought well, human, but you have already lost." Daniel recognized the voice. Warlord Zakar, the most feared Draxir warlord. Before Daniel could react, an explosion rocked the flagship. The ship lurched violently, alarms screaming. Fire erupted in the lower decks. Status, Daniel barked. A warrior at the console looked pale. A warship inside our fleet just turned on us. They disabled our shields. Daniel's eyes widened. A traitor. Someone inside their fleet had been working for the warlords all along. Varak's expression turned dark. Zakar got to one of our own. Daniel cursed. The warlords had played them. Now, their own ship was vulnerable. And worse, the enemy was boarding. The fight for the flagship. Sirens blared. Red warning lights flashed as the sound of metal boots echoed through the corridors. Daniel grabbed a pulse rifle and turned to Varak. We hold the bridge, no matter what. Varak grinned, his fangs flashing. Finally, a fight worth having. The doors burst open. Draxir warlords stormed in, their armor covered in battle scars, their weapons raised. Daniel fired first, his shots cutting through the first two enemies. Varak roared, charging forward like a beast unleashed. He grabbed a warlord by the throat and crushed his windpipe in one swift motion. The fight was brutal. Daniel ducked, dodging a massive Draxir war axe that slammed into the console behind him. He countered with a quick shot to the gut, the warlord collapsing at his feet. Varak fought like a monster, tearing through enemies with raw strength. But they kept coming. More warlords poured into the room, their forces overwhelming. Daniel's rifle clicked empty. Damn it. He grabbed a fallen blade just in time to block a strike aimed at his head. Varak was outnumbered, even with his strength. The warlords were closing in. They were losing ground. Then, a familiar voice echoed through the comms. You could use some help, human. Daniel's eyes widened. The rebels had arrived. The tide had turned again. The final stand. The battle raged across the flagship. Draxir rebels flooded into the corridors, flanking the warlords. Daniel and Varak fought side by side, their bond tested in the heart of war. Varak tore through enemies, while Daniel outmaneuvered them with speed and precision. The flagship shook as the last enemy warship was destroyed outside. The warlords were losing. Zakar himself entered the bridge, his armor covered in the blood of fallen rebels. The final fight was here. Varak stepped forward. This ends now. Zakar sneered. You have forgotten who you are, Varak. Varak growled. No, I remember. And today, we fight for something greater. The two titans clashed. Daniel, bleeding and exhausted, held off the remaining warlords, knowing that Varak had to win this fight. The bridge shook as Varak and Zakar traded blows, each hit powerful enough to break bones. Zakar lunged with his blade. Varak caught the weapon with his bare hands. And with a final roar, he snapped Zakar's neck. The warlords had fallen. The end of a war, the start of a legacy. Silence filled the command deck. Daniel panted, his hands slick with blood. Around him, the last of the enemy forces lay dead. The war was over. The rebel fleet was victorious. Varak turned to Daniel, his chest rising and falling. It is done. Daniel exhaled, looking around at the battlefield. Not yet. He turned toward the fleet controls. It was time to decide what came next. Would they return to war? Or would they forge something new? Daniel looked at Varak. The choice was clear. They would rewrite the future. A legend is born. The battlefield was silent. The echoes of war still clung to the air, the scent of scorched metal and burnt flesh heavy on the bridge. Sparks rained from broken consoles, flickering in the dim emergency lights. The last of the traitorous warlords lay lifeless on the cold steel floor, their rebellion crushed. Daniel Carter stood in the middle of it all, breathing hard, his uniform torn and soaked with blood. Some his own, some not. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of everything that had happened. Beside him, Varak loomed like a victorious titan, his golden eyes locked on the fleet's main controls. They had done it. The warlord's fleet was theirs. For the first time in history, a human and a Draxur stood together, victorious. But the battle wasn't over yet. Because now, they had to decide the fate of two species. The choice that would shape the galaxy. The war fleet was still active, its powerful engines humming through the void. The Draxur rebel ships surrounded them, waiting for a command. Daniel turned toward the main control panel, watching as countless human and Draxur colonies lit up on the map. The warlords had planned to use this fleet to destroy humanity, wipe out their cities, cripple their worlds. Now that power was in Daniel's hands. Varak stepped forward. "The warriors await your command, bondmate." Daniel let out a breath. "That's the problem," he muttered. "What the hell do I say?" He had never wanted to lead anyone. He had been a soldier, a survivor, an outsider. And now, he was standing on the bridge of a fleet powerful enough to change the course of history. His hands hovered over the fleet's weapon systems. One button, one command, and he could turn this fleet toward Earth, warn them, prepare for war. Or he could do something no one had ever done before. Something insane. He turned to Varak. "What if we don't fight?" Varak narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Daniel took a step back from the controls. "What if we don't use this fleet to fight at all? What if we use it to end the war instead of continuing it?" Silence. The warriors behind them stiffened. Varak frowned. "You would ask the Draxur to surrender." Daniel shook his head. "Not surrender. Unite." The dawn of something new. For a long moment, Varak said nothing. Then he threw his head back and laughed. Not in mockery, not in disbelief, but in understanding. "You wish to challenge the warlord's legacy itself," Varak said, crossing his arms. "You wish to break the cycle." Daniel nodded. "Isn't that what you wanted to?" The warlords fought because they feared change. They wanted to keep this war going forever. But what if we give the Draxur something better? Varak's golden eyes burned. And what would that be? Daniel turned back toward the map. A future. He looked at the rebel warriors behind him. The ones who had followed Varak, the ones who had fought against the warlords. "You all risked your lives because you believed in something different," Daniel said, his voice steady now. "What if we take this fleet and use it to protect, not destroy?" The rebels murmured among themselves. The Draxur had never known peace. Their history had been forged in war, written in blood. For a human to stand before them and offer something else, it was madness. But it was a madness worth considering. The final stand, without war. The humans would retaliate soon. The Galactic Council would see the Draxur fleet and assume it was still under warlord control. Daniel had to make a move before that happened. His fingers hovered over the comms panel. He could send a message to Earth, a warning, a declaration, a choice. He turned to Varak. "Will they follow you?" Varak studied him for a long moment, then placed a hand on his chest in salute. "They will follow us." Daniel exhaled. "Then let's give them a reason to." He pressed the button. Across the galaxy, a signal pulsed through space. A message from the flagship. A message that would be heard by humans, Draxur, and every species caught in the war. The message that changed everything. Daniel's voice rang out across the stars. "This war has taken everything from both of us. But today we stand together, not as enemies, but as warriors who refuse to fight a pointless battle. The warlords are dead. The Draxur people have a choice. Will we continue to destroy each other, or will we become something greater? We are no longer bound by the past. We are bound by something stronger. A future. Together." Silence followed. The galaxy held its breath. The war fleet hovered in place, thousands of Draxur warriors waiting for their next command. Then, one by one, the warships deactivated their weapons. The war was over. But something new had begun. The birth of a legend. Days later, the news spread. Across human colonies, people whispered about the one human who had bonded with a Draxur warrior and lived. Across Draxur worlds, warriors spoke of the battle that had broken their ancient cycle of war. In the halls of the Galactic Council, leaders debated, struggling to understand how one soldier had ended a conflict that should have lasted centuries. But to those who were there, those who had stood in the fire and survived, Daniel Carter was no longer just a soldier. He was something more. The first human bonded to a Draxur warrior. The first to turn warriors into allies. The first to rewrite history. As Daniel stood aboard the flagship, watching the stars ahead, Varak clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder. "We have done something impossible," Varak rumbled. Daniel smiled. "Yeah." He turned to the endless space ahead. "Now let's see what comes next." The legend of Daniel Carter and Varak had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again.